The first time it happened, I think we were at a bookstore. Our boys were little. We were back in the children's section, and someone looked at me and said, "Sir, do you work here?" I may have had on khaki pants and a button-up shirt, whatever it is bookstore employees wear, but they thought that I worked there, and I really couldn't help them. It also happened at Target. That day I must have had on a red polo shirt and khaki pants. My standard dress when we go to any of the parks around Florida is cargo pants and a long-sleeve shirt that can be either khaki or blue. And that's enough to make it look like you work there. So I frequently will have people stop me and say, "Sir, could you help me find whatever?" And I'm usually just as lost as they are, so I cannot help them. It has happened at the library. The funniest one for me was when my mom passed away, we had the visitation at the big funeral home. There weren't more than one visitation going on at that point in time. And my brothers and I look enough alike that if you were to see us all around, you would gather that we are related. And I walked out of the big parlor area into the big entryway of the funeral home, and a woman said, "Sir, could you tell me where your bathrooms are?" And I just said, "Ma'am, they are right behind you on the left," and got her on her way. I share all of this to say apparently I can put on the clothes and fit pretty well easily into just about any role as an employee somewhere. And I share this also because the Beatitudes have become an increasingly uncomfortable thing for me to try to put on. As I think about the Beatitudes, they say, "Blessed are," and there's all of these categories, and then there's what happens, and it's you see God, you know God, yours is the kingdom. And what you find in all of this is the sentiment that there are certain people that Jesus is talking about who live in the kingdom, they inhabit the kingdom, they work in the kingdom, and he goes down this list of blessings to kind of say what that looks like. And for most of my faith life, it has been pretty easy for me to put those clothes on and see myself in these Beatitudes. And whether it's poor in spirit or mourning or meek, I can find seasons in my life where I felt those particular ways. But right now, I find myself at a particular crossroads. I find myself at a crossroads where on the one side there's a sign that points and it says, "Flourishing" is in that direction. And the other sign points and it says, "Fear" is in that direction. And right above both of those is a big sign that has the Beatitudes on them. Now when I think about the Beatitudes and the more I struggle with them, I find myself thinking of all of the things that Jesus says in the gospel. He stands up first thing in the temple and says, "I came to proclaim good news to the poor and freedom to the captive, sight to the blind." He's talking about the people that are on the fringes of society. Later in Matthew, he will say that when you welcome the least of these, you welcome me. And if you pay attention all along, Jesus is talking about very intensely about the people that are on the fringes that are left out from society. So when he talks about these Beatitudes, I suspect he's saying similar things. Now, what I'm about to share with you are my own struggles, and I don't mean to minimize time you may have spent in any of these places of Beatitude. I'm just telling you where I'm at right now. I used to think blessed are the poor in spirit was the kind of things when I had a bad day where I was struggling to find focus in life and purpose. But now when I hear blessed are the poor in spirit, I hear something different. I have an image of a woman who's been physically and emotionally abused by her spouse, who has told her again and again that she is worthless, who has told her lies and convinced her that they're the truth, and who has taken her truth and turned it into a lie, and has convinced her that she is no longer a whole human being. And she has begun to believe that. When I hear blessed are the poor in spirit, that's who I think of now. Blessed are those who mourn. I certainly, I've lost both my parents already, and there have been times of mourning in my life, and all of you as well. But when I hear blessed are those who mourn in this Beatitude now, I think of people whose whole entire existence is an existence of mourning. I think of a refugee mother whose husband was taken away by the paramilitary people that knocked on the door, whose house was bombed and the village destroyed, and she has brought her children as far away from that violence as she can, only to land in a refugee camp with 100,000 other people. No one wants any of them. And so she mourns not just the life of her husband and not just the loss of her home and her village, but her whole way of being. And worst off, she probably mourns the future because she sees no hope for her children having anything besides the misery that they live in. When I hear blessed are those who mourn, that's who I see now. Blessed are the meek. Meek means powerless. You have no voice. And the only image that has stuck in my head all week has been that little boy that in Syria that they pulled out of the rebel months ago, and they set him in an ambulance, and he was covered in the dust from the rubble of the bombs, and he had blood, and his hair was all crazy, and he had this blank stare in his face that you could bet is never going to go away. Because the people that he loves are gone, and the people who speak for him are not there. He is meek, and blessed are the meek. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness. I used to find myself, wanting to grow in faith, and I thought, yeah, that's hungering and thirsting for righteousness. But righteousness is right behavior before God. It is godly living, but it also has a component of justice. And justice for me is really the idea that not every human being has an opportunity, but every human being is really valued and given a place in our culture and in our communities to live and thrive and be well. And when I hear now, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, I see those whole categories of people that we do not treat as fully human, who we exclude from tables of power, who don't get to have a voice. Blessed are those people that hunger to just be fully human in a community of people. When I hear blessed are the merciful and the peacemaker and the pure in heart, I hope that I have visited those territories now and again, but I think Jesus is talking about people who live there permanently. I think of Mother Teresa when you say blessed are the merciful. She fully inhabited mercy, and she lived there all the time amongst people that needed mercy. Peacemakers are those that walk into the most violent gang situations or war situations, and they just camp out there to try to bring peace in those places. Those that are pure in heart are pure in heart, and they live there all that time. It's not just those of us when we visit there. So as I've struggled with all of these, those first 7 are parts that I maybe have spent a little bit of time in, but it's getting increasingly difficult for me to identify with those places because I am not oppressed. I am not living on the fringes. I am not hungry and poor and starving and beaten down. And all of this struggle really, though, has grown out of the last 2 Beatitudes. When I was in seminary, my professor was explaining these to us. Now, when you're a seminary professor, you're talking to people who are getting a master's degree, right? Largely at this point it was a white group of people that were fairly well off, and here he is explaining to us these Beatitudes. And I think he told us that the first 7, we didn't really fit into those so well. Then he came to the last 2. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, which means you are persecuted in that place of justice and right living. Blessed are you when you are persecuted because of following Jesus, right? People who revile you and persecute you and say evil, false things because you have followed Jesus. The way he explained these to us was with a story. He said, his dad, was a professor in the 1960s. And he had been passed over for tenure or promotion or something a number of times, and he finally decided he had to figure out why. So he went and he sat down with his superior and said, I've been passed over again and again, why is this? Now understand that he was active in the 60s in the civil rights movement. He was in the South and he had a voice, and he stood with the people that were standing in the streets being beaten up and everything else. The people that were poor in spirit and weak and mourning and hungry and thirsting for righteousness. He was standing with those people. So his superior looked at him and in much more colorful language than I'm going to use said, you love black people, and as long as that is the case, you will never see promotion or tenure in this place. He shared that story with us to say, these last 2 Beatitudes mean that if you stand with the people that live permanently in those other parts of the Beatitudes, you start to live in those places as well. If you stand up with people that are poor in spirits and mourning and meek and hungering and thirsting for righteousness, if you go where there are people living with mercy and peacemaking and with pureness of heart, you will end up living there because the culture will put you there. And this is exactly what we see with Jesus. He comes into the world with divine power. He could have done anything he wanted. He was pure in heart. He was merciful. He was full of righteousness. And yet he went into a culture and he sat with the very people that were poor in spirit. He went to the people that were cast out and set aside and left behind. And when he did all of that, the people that weren't said, you can't do that. And they ultimately hung him on the cross for it. So by coming and standing with the people that were persecuted, he himself became the one that was persecuted. But death did not hold him down, and he came back with new life. We sit here today because he came out of that tomb, and that tomb was empty. So I now come back to this place of crossroads, where I stand and there's flourishing on the right, and there's fear or left, and there's fear on the right, and there's this huge sign of the Beatitudes that I am having trouble finding myself living in. I don't relate to them in the way that I once easily did. I think of the Lord's Prayer, Martin Luther in his catechisms talks about those two petitions that I talked about with the kids. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He says, we don't pray these to make them happen. God's kingdom is always coming. God's will is always being done. We pray them instead so that they will come to us. Now, we can get on some dangerous territory here thinking that we have to pray the Lord's Prayer for God to love us. That is not the case. Luther separates and talks about two different time periods. He talks about eternity, and he talks about now. Jesus came and was killed and raised to new life so that we can eternally be in God's presence. That is done. We do not have to worry about that. But he then turns to the here and now and says, we pray thy kingdom come, thy will be done, so that God's kingdom can be among us now. And the word that he uses, any guesses what it is? Flourishing. He talks about flourishing. When the kingdom comes, we flourish. When we live in God's kingdom, we flourish. We have full life. We have rich life. We live in the place of flourishing. I see these Beatitudes now, especially the last two for me, as an invitation into flourishing, away from fear. So many times in my life, I think I've already been at this crossroads, and I've turned around and walked back the other way where it seemed less dangerous. Not even taking the scary route, just going back to where it was nice and comfortable, and I can see the Beatitudes as an easy thing to put on. But now I stand here, looking at flourishing in fear, and knowing that grace has done that path of flourishing. When I was in middle school, I don't remember if it was every Wednesday or once a month, but I would walk out the back door of the school and not get on the bus. I would walk down the hill a little ways to my friend's house. He was one of my classmates, but he also went to the same church I did, and we had confirmation on Wednesday afternoons. So his mom would drive us over to confirmation. His dad couldn't. His dad was the custodian at our school, and he worked a lot. My mom would then come pick us up. Now, I don't remember exactly what we did in confirmation. We did kick a soccer ball against the back wall of the church for a while until the pastor was ready. That's all I remember. Which is why I don't do confirmation whatever way we did it back then. But as we gathered there, I can look back now and say that he and I have a lot in common. He had 3 brothers. I just have 2. One of my brothers went on to become a teacher and a coach. His older brother became a teacher and a coach. One of my younger brothers is a blue-collar guy. He's a sheet metal worker. And one of his younger brothers works in an auto plant. Now, at this point, I run out of brothers. But my brother-in-law was in the Navy for 20 years. His youngest brother serves in the United States Air Force. So when you take a look at us side by side, you have this picture of sort of all-American families, right? Covering the gamut from serving as teachers to building and making things and serving in the military. But we do have different stories that got us started. His story starts with being a refugee. And I don't know the whole early beginnings of it. The first part of it I heard was that they got in a boat in the darkness of night and they started to go across a river. And if the baby, which one was the youngest at the time, had cried, that would have been it, because it would have gave them up to the soldiers that were around. And they made it to the other side of that river, and they made it to this country, and they made it to a place where my home church sponsored them, adopted them. Last spring was the 50th anniversary of the congregation, and I was able to go home for that. They invited all the pastors, all 7 of them, 6 of them made it. They invited those of us who had gone on to seminary, having been children there. And during the reception, we all got to talk, right? Don't give pastors a microphone, it takes a long time. But they made through all the pastors, they all had something to share, they asked me to speak. But their whole family, minus Dad, who was probably working, and the brother who's in the service, they were all there. And she got to talk, Mom did. And she talked about how this congregation's love of them who they did not know, of people who had been rejected and turned out and run away, how that congregation's love welcomed them in and transformed their lives so that they could flourish. And then you listen to the pastors talk. And they would talk about the ups and downs of the life of the congregation, which were many. Financial struggles and struggles with even just keeping the doors open. But all through that, the congregation never lost sight of that experience of welcoming in these people. It was probably risky when they decided to do it. There were certain people that said we shouldn't. But they did it, and the congregation flourished. Its heart and soul flourished because of that experience. As I stand at this crossroads of my own faith right now, I have turned and walked back to the comfortable many, many times. But there are people throughout our world that are living in camps. There are people who are beaten up every day. There are people who need us to stand with them. And it is down that path of flourishing that we do that, not the path of fear. And when we go down that path of flourishing, I can't tell you what it looks like. And I definitely can't tell you what it looks like for you, but I can tell you what it looks like for me right now. Right now we are bombarded with information, much of which is false, some of which is true because facts actually do exist. And part of what I have to do now is to dedicate some time to making sure I'm educated and understand. When it comes to immigration, making sure I know how hard it is to get into this country and where the issues and the struggles are. When it comes to our economy, making sure I understand who is being left out. When it comes to domestic violence and human trafficking and all those things, really digging in and understanding what is happening around us in our world. And then, the next step that I know is coming for me is I have to do something. Faith is something that happens in action. Those refugee families that came, the one that we sponsored, we had to do something for them to be there. We could not just sit and say, well, hopefully someone else will do that. So I know that is coming for me. I don't know what it is, but I do know it will mean making phone calls and resisting and doing things when I think our government is running in the wrong direction and cheering them along when they go in the right direction. And it will mean challenging you to do some things that you probably think are too political for the church. I don't know what it all means, but I do know that it is in that space that we will flourish. It is in that place that we will see the fullness of God's grace. And so I see these Beatitudes now as a challenge, but as an invitation for us to really fully live into this grace that we have been given. It is not something we should fear. It is something that we should walk fully into, trusting that Jesus will get us where Jesus needs us to be. Amen.